In this video, you're going to learn how to host a Next.js website on your own server. So without necessarily using Vercel or Netlify. There's a misconception that you can't run Next.js except on some kind of fancy front-end like platform. But the truth is you can actually run, and Next.js is technically open source, and you can run and host a Next.js website on any server as long as it's running Node.js. While those services are really good, useful, and all these kind of things, there's a lot of issues in terms of like where you get surprise billing, you get stuck in your ecosystem. And not only that, the price that they give you is not per account. It's not per account, it's per developer. So if you sign up for, say, a $20 account, but you have another developer working with you or two developers, it's ×3 for the same kind of service. And that's where it kind of feels like it's not fair. While I love those services, as developers, we do need options to try other things. It should be that case because Next.js is supposed to be open source, right? The cool thing about having your own server also is you can actually run multiple Next.js websites on the same server as long as you replicate the same steps that we're going to do in this tutorial. You're going to just need to replicate the config file and update the port, and it's all going to do the same thing. Another thing that we're going to do in this video is actually show you how to auto deploy the website, which is pretty cool, right? Because that's the part that we really rely on these fancy front-end hosting platforms to think that that's the only thing they could do for us, but you could actually do it yourself. So you're going to host a Next.js website on your own server. It's going to be a little more cost effective. You can actually host multiple Next.js websites on the same server. You could have multiple devs working on the same project without worrying about these costs, additional accounts. Something could happen, right? You go past your bandwidth, you won't get, hit with a crazy surprise bills. But the key is that you shouldn't feel like you can't set up a Next.js website or host a site except through some of these front-end platform hosting. So you could set up a server with DigitalOcean or AWS. It doesn't matter. What matters is that it's your own server. So if you want to use AWS, that's fine. If you want, I'm going to be, in this example, I'm going to be using DigitalOcean to set it up. What needs to happen is very simple. A server, which you can set up on AWS DigitalOcean, you need to install Node, you need to install npm, and you need to install NGINX, which is going to be the web server. And then you're going to need to install PM2, which is a package in order to launch the website. Without further ado, let's get going. If you like Next.js, CSS, front-end development, full stack development, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let's get going. I do have some notes on the side here for myself, but I just want to show you, I want to focus on the browser. Okay, so we're setting up an Ubuntu server. You could do that with AWS or whatever you want. We're literally just setting up a droplet, and it's called Ubuntu. So we're going to do it in New York. That's my data center. And then we're going to scroll down. This is just going to take a few minutes. I'm going to do the latest version. Now, when it comes to setting up, you have the regular options here. Obviously, you have a bunch of different kind of servers, so many different levels. But for this purposes, you could use, I would go with, if you really want this to be production ready, I would go with a premium AMD or premium Intel. And I think you're really going to get a lot of benefit and value out of having, one of these nice servers. Although I think the lowest you can go is going to be the 2 CPUs, in my opinion. So I think this one is fine, and this one right here is fine. Can you probably get away with this? Maybe this one. I think this might be the lowest one that you can get away with, making sure that it has 2 GB of memory, because the reason for that is when you npm run build, that takes up a lot of memory, and that's where things could crash. So you want to make sure, I think you definitely need 2 GB of memory in order to do npm run build, which it's going to need to do in order to deploy. So to get a really nice one is this one. You get 3 TB, transfer, 2 TB transfer, it's fine. For the sake of this tutorial, I am going to use this one. And I would go with the premium. You could probably get away with the regular as well, which is the 2 GB memory. I'm going to do this just for the sake of the tutorial delete, so I'm fine with going with this guy. Let's do premium AMD, is a little cheaper. All right, so that's important to know. I have tried the 1 GB memory and it's crashed on me, so you want to make sure you do have. Now, the good thing of this is, it might seem like it's a little more money, but the idea is that at least you have something that you can count on, that you're not going to get limited by, or you're going to get these surprise charges. And you're also, if you want, there's times when I use Vercel where I've had another developer try to commit code, and what happened was they it didn't get deployed because they're not on the Vercel account, which I thought was kind of kind of ridiculous. So let's get going and let's do. And then now what I'm going to do is add my key, which I didn't add. So in order to do that, what we have to do is go to your terminal, and the command is cat. I'm going to copy over my default. You can make one, a brand new one, but I'm going to copy the one that I have. Yeah, so what I did here was new SSH key. I pasted it here and I named it Omar Mac Mini, and here it is. So now I'm going to make sure it says, hey, add all these three. I guess these other ones are older. So now when we make the terminal, it should have this key. Now that's pretty important. This is nice. It's improved metrics. They have a nice, alert system for this. So we'll scroll down. I'm just going to name this Next.js server. So I know, and then that's it. Pretty much it. You create the droplet. This is going to auto, deploy itself, and it's going to be not auto deploy, but the server is going to basically, get live. So it's going to take a couple of minutes. I'm going to let that go here. While that's getting set up, most of the work I'm going to be doing is inside of the terminal. Once you do have this all launched, all the command prompts I'm going to be doing is logging in through the server, through my terminal. And I don't know if some people might feel intimidated, but it's pretty easy. I am going to have a gist with all of my commands, but we're going to be doing all the commands, and I keep all the commands for myself in a gist, even because for me to remember, right? So that's important. You definitely need that to make sure you can remember, because I always don't remember. So I keep like notes if you want to keep a Notion document. That's good as well. Now I'll try to log in. SSH root at the new IP. Click yes. Perfect. So now that we have it added, we are logged in. You can see we're logged into the terminal. So let me just go back here. Let's do clear. All right. So I'm going to start up from the top. So now the first thing we want to do is just make sure that the server has the latest things. It's just sudo apt update and sudo apt upgrade. And you can copy that over. Could not get, okay. Wait, let's just try sudo apt update. All right, that should be fine. So just all we need is the update. Let's actually just try this if the upgrade works, but I don't believe it's needed. So it looks like you need the first one and then the second one after. So I'm going to update my gist actually to do that. So click yes. So if you get this prompt, you're going to keep everything basic and just keep going. All right, this step it's just a waiting thing. It's installing things. All this is kind of making sure that Ubuntu is installing its latest packages. We don't have to worry about this part. We're just making sure that it's kind of on the freshest, the latest versioning. And now we're going to continue adding our stuff. So once that's done, okay, so now we're all set. Now what we got to do is we want to install NGINX. NGINX is the web server. That's all. So you have a bare bones server, but now you need the web server that's actually going to be running the website. All right. So here it is. It's sudo apt install NGINX, and we're also adding the certbot, which is going to be for adding SSL later. So click OK. Just click enter. All set. Clicking OK. I'm doing all the defaults. And now what we're going to do is we're going to open up the firewall. And again, I'm going to have all the stuff in the gist. And we're just allowing NGINX to be available on the internet. So and then these are just basic commands. Again, they'll be all in my gist. It's all enabling the firewall. So once that's done, pretty simple. Perfect. Firewall is active. NGINX is open, which is the web server. Now what we're going to do is we're going to install npm, right? So you can, npm run build, npm run, make sure everything is there. So we're just going to install npm. This might take, I don't know how long this takes. I don't think it's going to, if it does, it might take a few minutes. Again, just because it's based on your internet connection and it's just adding all the stuff. So let's just let it run. All right, so it's all set and installed. I'm going to clear. That one takes a little while. Now we want to install Node, right? So we want to install Node.js because that's important for Next.js. All right, so there's two ways to install Node. One is through NVM so you can, use different versions, or you can just install the latest based off from a repo. I'm going to install using NVM, and it should be fine. Although it's important to note that with NVM, you're going to need to identify later on. There's a step later that you can't miss, that you have to identify which version you needed to use. That's the difference when you are using NVM, is you have to specify the version. So I think this is fine. I'm going to leave both methods in the gist, but I think this is NVM works okay. And I'm literally just copying and pasting what I have. We're just pulling from the repo to install NVM. And then there's a couple of, steps here. Exec shell. So you're just going to do that. And now we're going to install Node. npm install. So it's downloading and installing the latest version. It should be fine. I like to do this step, probably not necessary, because it looks like it's already installed, but I like to say npm install 20 just to be sure, and it's telling me that it's already installed. I just like to use that step, and now we're telling it most likely it's using npm 20, but we're going to tell it use 20. Again, it's saying, oh, okay, good. So you see now it's telling me now using. And I like to say make sure the default is 20, npm alias default 20, and it's saying great. So now default 20 is going to be the 20.12. So we're done. So now we have Node. Now we basically have what we need, right? Because that's really what you need to run a Next.js website. You need a Node server. Now we're going to install something called PM2. That's what's going to launch the website on a port. Okay, so let's do that. npm install, and we're installing this one globally, PM2. So let that run. All right, so that should be done. Again, I'm just going to clear so this is a little more friendly looking. So do PM2 status just to make sure. Great. So it's saying now this is showing me like everything's kind of there. Nothing is launched. It's just saying we have the PM2 successfully there. Now, our server is pretty much set up. That's all we need. Now the next step is what we need to get, we could either build a Next.js website, run on the server. We could just go in npm, just put it on here, or and that's it. And then we need to auto deploy and those kind of things and launch the app. So that's really just the next steps. The server is set up. It's not much. So I'm going to actually create a Next.js website locally, push it onto a repo, and make sure that this is set up to pull it, because that's going to be important. In order to do that, you're going to need to have an SSH key all set up. So let's do that. I think this step is important because I missed that in one of my last tutorials. I think this step is critical. So what we're going to do is we're going to create an SSH key on the server and then add that key to your repo, or you can add it to your account, and that allows the server to pull from the repo. Okay, so let's do that now. So right here, I'm going to do cd root and then .ssh. This is kind of the same thing that's on your Mac or your Windows. You have these keys locally, so we're kind of doing the same step but on the server. And then we're going to be doing we're going to be setting up the key. Add your email. Maybe for the sake of the tutorial, I'm just going to leave this alone. You should add your email to it, and that's important. So click that, generate. All right, so we're going to enter the file, and basically, yes, we just want to keep it called IDRSA. We don't need a passphrase. We just leave that empty. Great. So now we have the key. Now there's just a couple of little commands to make sure that it's the SSH key is added to your root engine and that it can read the IDRSA. It's pretty simple. You're adding it, you're adding the identity, and now we're all set. So it's added. Now we need to do the same step. We want to copy over that key. We want to get that key, which is cat, and then the path to it. So here's our new key. So now we're going to copy this over, right? Now we're going to flip back. We need to go to our repo. I'm going to create, I didn't create the repository name. I should have created that. But what we can do is add it to our account. So this way we don't have to worry. Then you could, this server can always pull from any repo. So, since I skipped this step with the repo, I'm just going to go ahead and add it to my settings. So what we'll do is just add the key here. So click new SSH key. I'm just going to add it. I'm going to call this Next.js. Call whatever you want. I'm just going to say so I know it's a tutorial because I'm going to delete this later. And authentication key. And it's all set. Oops. So now we'll just do password added. So now it is added here to the bottom, never used. That's all that's important. Make sure now that we have the key. When you add it to your account, you can pull from any repo, or you can add it directly to the repo, right? So that's good. So we're all set up here. So now I'm just, again, you could have added here. I'm going to go ahead and just create a repository called Next.js host. I'll just, just call it Next.js. I'm just going to literally call it just to keep it easy. We'll make it private. And I'm going to leave all this default, just creating the repository, and it's all set. Now, the repository, there's nothing here. So now I'm actually going to build this locally, not on my new server. I'm going to build it locally, push to the repo, and then have my server pull it, automatically. So let's get started with that. So now I'm just going to share the whole screen and just open up my my VS Code, and it's pretty easy. Getting the command for Next.js, I'm going there. I don't know why I never memorized it. I really should, but this is all you need to just create it. So I'm going to go into CD development where I have most of my projects. I'm just going to create a latest npm. I'm not going to do anything to it. I'm literally just creating bare bones. I'll just call it Next.js JS. Just keep it easy. Not going to use TypeScript. I always wonder why the defaults keep switching. It's very strange. I don't like to use TypeScript. Oh well. I'm going to use ESLint, and I'm not going to use Tailwind. I don't know why that's by default. And I don't really need the source directory thing, so click no. I want to use the app router, the latest. I do like the at import alias, so I'm gonna keep that by default. Leave that at. That's, again, I'm not gonna use it for this tutorial, but that's important because I like to, it allows you to have like a root. All right, so that's all done. I'm gonna cd into it, right? I don't need to do much. I mean, I could npm I, make sure this works, you know, maybe just to be 100% sure, just go ahead and npm install, npm run dev. I just make sure that all this is working, because, you know, make sure that when you do deploy, you just want to make sure that there's no issues. But literally here it is, just a default bare bones for cell site. Usually when we do this, we delete all these things, right? But just for the sake of the tutorial, we're fine. So we're going to get rid of this. Now what I'm going to do is I want to push this into my repo. So I'm going to use this content, copy it over, and it's just going to push it over. So once I do git push, it all is there. So if I hit a refresh, everything is here, right? So I got my bare bones Next.js website doing nothing. This is the repo that, let's say this is my project that I want to be working on. I want that to deploy, and I want to make sure my server can pull here. All right, so now let's get back into the terminal. So back in my repo, let me clear. We're leaving where we're picking up where we left off, which we just got the server running. We got our SSH key added. Now we want to pull that repo here. When we auto deploy, it'll do all this. We need to do these steps automatically, but for now, I'm going to do it manually. I just want to make sure I do it manually first to make sure it's, you know, kind of there and all running. Then auto deploy, we can have it do it later. But I just want to clone it. So all we're going to do is go back to, you know, our browser, and we're going to literally just go to git clone, right? So we're going to get the URL, which I got it. Now, if your SSH key is not added properly, this step is going to break. It's not going to work. You have to make sure your SSH key from the host, from the server, is added to the repo or to your GitHub account. So now let's switch back to the terminal. And now we literally want to go to the area where we want to put the directory. So it's usually at cd/var/ww, right? So if we click ls, type ls, we see HTML is like the default thing the server gives you. I don't need to bother with that. I'm going to put it in my own directory. So we're going to place it inside the www directory. So we're going to do git clone. And it is, yes, are you sure you want to connect? So yes. And yes, so wow, that was actually pretty quick. So it literally just added it now. So again, this step won't work if your SSH key is not there, but if you click ls, you can see now we have it there. What I like to do is go to cd Next.js. Now we have to just install, you know, just run it, right? So we just want to npm, you know, npm I. Now, and these are the steps that if you have low memory on the server, these things kind of can be memory intensive. So you want to make sure you have a decent server. So npm I, we're going to install it, and then we're just going to do npm run build. We're not going to start it because our PM2 package is going to do all that. We're just going to npm run build it to make sure it's all there and make sure we can actually launch the website. We're going to do all the auto deploy stuff after. Okay, great. And now we're going to do npm run build. So now it's just going to build. And again, this step is also memory intensive. Just make sure it fully builds. All right, so it finished building, and now you can see everything's successful. Okay, so now we know that the steps work. All right, so now let me just kind of clear this out. Now, here's the part where at the step where we need to tell it, we need to tell the NGINX server like where the website is, right? Where the app exists, and then so we can launch it. Okay, so this is common part of NGINX. This has nothing to do with Next.js. It's very common if you're going to run any website, even a PHP website inside of a server, you need to do this step. There is a couple, the configuration file is a little different depending on the website, but for Next.js, I have the config file in my gist. I'm going to show you that as well. But for now, we're going to create the config file for NGINX to direct it to where the app exists, okay? That exists at cd/etc/nginx. So I'm showing here. So cd sites available, right? So that's where it shows the sites available. Now ls will show the directory. You can see it only has a default. But right now, what we want to do is we want it to make sure we create one for the new app. Now, for example, if you switch over to the browser, you can see here if we copy and paste the IP, the server should be all set up. There it is. So I should have done this step before, but if you go directly to the IP, you can see there's a default, you know, file which is under the default directory. So if we go back here, that is what's coming from the default. Now we need to create a new config file for the app, the specific app. So we're going to call it, we're going to say touch. That's going to create it, and I'm just going to call it Next.js for now. And then now we're going to go nano Next.js, which is we're going to create and edit the file. So I am going to send you this gist, and this is basically the file that you need. This is just telling it, okay, hey server, where does this thing exist? And when someone goes to the domain name, where do you want me to actually open up the website? So that's what we're doing now. So we'll go back into our terminal. So we're literally just going to paste that config file here. I'm going to go up. And now we want to say, now the problem is I don't have a domain name. I assume, for the sake of the tutorial, I'll just leave it alone. I do have a website called Omar. Maybe I could just do one. I don't know if I'll demo this part, but it should work just with the IP address. For now, I can skip this step of the SSL. For the sake of the tutorial, let me actually just use the IP address, right? So that's just because I need to get a domain, and maybe we can upgrade. We could do this step later. Go down here and you need to tell it where it exists, right? var www, and then the app exists here. It is called Next.js, whatever you called it. And if you scroll down, that is pretty much all you need. This you will need if you want to have multiple Next.js websites running on the same server, and that's what makes it awesome. So we can also add ports here, and that is for another tutorial, but there's no difference. You're just going to create the same config file, change the port. For now, I'll leave the default port. We're going to hit Control O and save, and then Control X for exit. Now there's another important step, which is we have to do this syslink the file so that it's under sites enabled. So we have to enable this configuration, and that also is in my gist. So I'm just going to paste it here, but we want to edit the etc NGINX sites available name of the app. Remember, it's called Next.js. And then we want to do the same. So it's going to put it into the enabled directory, which is important. So we'll do Next.js again. You want to have the same name, click enter, and that's it. So it's enabling that configuration. If you miss this step, it won't work. This is a critical step. Now we're just going to make sure our NGINX configuration is filed with NGINX-T. You want to make sure it says okay. If it doesn't, that's an issue. So you want to make sure that that works. What I like to do is remove the default. I mean, you could leave it alone. My memory of this is that if you're going to change the port, you're okay leaving the default. But if you're going to use the same 3000, then you want to get rid of the default because it's going to keep going. Most likely, the server IP without a domain specification will go to the default. If you're going to have a domain, you can probably tell it where to go. But for now, I'll just get rid of it, and we will do RM default. So I'm just going to get rid of the default. And then I'm also going to go into the sites enabled, CD, sites enabled, and then RM default. So if you click do ls, you can see it doesn't exist anymore, right? Now you want to restart our NGINX system, CTL, restart NGINX. You always want to restart the NGINX server. If you make a change to the config file, you're never really going to be making changes to the config file that much. It's only when you first set it up, only when you want to do it. So you got to make sure you refresh the NGINX. All right, great. So now what we want to do is launch this website, okay? So now if we refresh to the IP, if we go back to the browser, you can see here I refresh and there's back, right? Because I got rid of the default, which no one should be going to the IP anyway, right? Unless you want to have like a default page here, but no one's going direct to the IP. They're going to be going to the domain name. But I'm going to be doing the IP for now because my config file is all set, but I haven't launched the app yet. All right, so let's clear. All right, so now we're done. The next step is we want to launch the app. We haven't launched the Next.js app, right? It's not running. This is where PM2 comes into to play because now we need to tell it to launch. If you tell it to launch, it's going to launch on the default port 3000. But I think it's very important to specify the port because when you want to have multiple websites, you need to have different ports. So let's just get into the habit of specifying the port. I have this in the gist as well. So I'm going to paste it here, then edit. So PM2 start npm. Then we want to change the name. I'm going to call this, this is the name of the app. You want to make it the same as, I would just keep everything the same as what you've named the config file so you don't get confused. So I'm just going to call it Next.js. Start on port 3001. Okay. So I like to do PM2 show, just kind of refresh. Oh, PM2, no, list. Oh, so it errored out here. So let's see what's going on. This is a good catch. I seem to miss this step often and get very frustrated as to what the issue is. You have to, when you run, you have to run it PM2 has to run when you're in the directory. So that's another thing I missed. So now let's do this. Let's just do PM2 stop Next.js. So let's delete this. PM2 delete Next.js. Now we're done, right? So we don't have nothing running again. All right, so nothing is running. So let's start again from scratch. What we want to do is go into the directory. That's the step I missed. So we'll go to cd var ww ls. We want to go into cd Next.js. So we have to go into the directory of the app. Now we can do the same step. We want to launch it. I'll actually just go back up. Going up, yeah. So same command, launch on 3001. Now it should be launched. I like to do PM2 again list just to see it again to make sure it didn't error out. PM2 list didn't. This is online. It would have just crashed right away. It wouldn't have worked. So we should be all set. So the Next.js app should be actually running right now, but now we want to make sure that actually let's see if it's actually working. So let's go back into the browser. Now let's refresh. Oh man, didn't work. Let's see here what's going on. Another mistake is when you run the ports, you have to make sure you specify the port. So it looks like I believe I put it in 3000, didn't I? But I launched it under 3001 because I'm into the habit of doing ports. So let's go back. Let's stop this. Let's do it again. So let's stop it. Let's do PM2 stop Next.js, and then PM2 delete Next.js. Now let's launch it on the 3000 port, because if you go back into the config file, you could edit the config file to say 3001, but I left it at 3000, I believe. So let's just launch it on that port, on the 3000 port. Same mistake. Let's go back here. So PM2, let me just edit the name to Next.js. Then let's go to 3000, port 3000. All right, now this should work, but let's give it, I'm just gonna do PM2 list. Okay, so it didn't error out. Now I'm gonna flip back over to the browser and we get this moment of truth again. Let's say refresh, and there you go. So again, doing this multiple times, you realize these errors. I think a lot of people, maybe it's good that we run into these errors together, because people do these mistakes, same mistakes I made by themselves, miss a little step here and there. So little step, you have to go into the directory when you launch, and you have to make sure you specify the port in the config file, and when you launch the app, where do you want it? So here it is. So this is live. This is a live IP. Here it is. Now, if you were to specify the domain name in that config file, you would have been fine. It would launch right here. All right. So I did want to show you this step. I figured let's not miss this step of actually adding a domain name to make sure it runs. Then we'll get to the auto deploy. I think that's important. So let's do that. So let's actually get it to that. Now I have one of my domain names that I use. I'm gonna just add a subdomain. It's the same step, so I don't have to purchase a new domain. So what you're gonna do is, if you're gonna run, say, myomarl.com, you're gonna run that, you want to change your a record at to the IP of the server. I'm gonna do it for a subdomain. So all I need to do is add a new record and go, I'll just say Next.js for now as a subdomain. And then what I want to do is go grab the URL of, I want to copy over the IP address of what I just created. I'm going to save it here. So that's the DigitalOcean, server. That's my server. That's all it is. And I'm going to have a subdomain called nextjs.omarl.com, at least so I have some domain. And we'll try to make it so it's 1 minute in terms of it propagating. We'll click save changes. So hopefully that's it takes some time, but you want to make sure that step works before you start the SSL. If your A record is not added, the SSL key, when you're trying to add it, it won't work because it doesn't see that it's pointed to the server. The domain has to point successfully to add the free SSL. Okay, the next step is we want to make sure that we edit the config file to, instead of identifying the IP, we identify the actual domain name. So we'll go into cd. I'm in here already, right? So ls, or got my, so cd Next.js. Oh, nano is the actual file. So nano Next.js. This is a config file. Now we want to edit this, right? So now we want to say, instead of the server name, we want to put the actual domain name. But in my case, I'm using a subdomain. So I'm just, for the sake of the tutorial, I have to buy a new one. So it's nextjs.omarl.com. And that's it. Everything else stays the same. Next.js is pointing to the same directory. That's fine. It's going to the 3000 port. If this was another website, a new one, you could just do that and then make a new config, do a whole steps or a new config file and change it to 3001. So we'll save this. Control O, save, go back. Now we want to restart NGINX. Let's just make sure there's no errors here. And let's just, so now we could just restart our NGINX, right? Because we changed the config file. So let's, all right, so we're good to go. Everything restarted. Now it's one command, and the command is, it's the free let's encrypt SSL. So it's now that we added you have to make sure you didn't miss a step in the first time where we added the cert bot NGINX, but we did already. So this is doing, if you want to do the domain name and the www, but in our case we only have one, so it's going to be NGINX dot, let's do right here, so it's going to be Next.js.omarl.com. That's the domain name. This step again only works if the A record is already pointing. I'm assuming it is by now, so click save. And I'm not going to enter anything for the sake of the tutorial. Oh, they need something. All right, well, we'll just do default for now. All right, I'm going to click yes. I'm going to click yes, doesn't really matter. And hopefully it's requesting a certificate. And I think the domain name is pointed successfully. So let's see. Okay, perfect. So we should be all set. I don't know if we need to restart our PM2, but let's just give it a shot. Let's just see if not just literally doing that just works. Here, all right, so the IP is not working anymore because we updated the config file. Let's see if we go to nextjs.omarl.com. Oh, wow, there you go. So it's pretty smooth. We didn't even have to restart PM2 or anything like that. It's pretty seamless because our config file updated and we restarted everything. So now it knows where to go. That's it. That's all you need to actually add the domain. You could repeat that step to add a second domain, second website. Now, what we want to do is do the auto deploy, right? That's the part that is really important because with things like Vercel and Netlify, all those things are key. So let's do that together. Another SSH has to be created for this to be on GitHub and to be on our server. We're going to do that together. And then we need to add a new file, an actions file into our repo in order to do this. So let's get started. Now I want to get off of the server. So I'm going to do control, what is it? Control. I want to close out of here. Here we are. So we're closed to the connection. Now we're back locally. Now the step that we want to do is we need to create a new key with it because we're going to need to use the private key of that. So you're going to basically create the local key. You're going to take the private key, put it onto GitHub, and take the public key, put it onto the server. This is only for auto deployment. And we're going to do that now. All right. And we're going to make a separate key for this because we don't want to use any of our other keys. All right. So now what we're going to do is, again, all these commands are going to be in the gist, but I'm going to go to CD. Again, I'm on my local computer now, CD root. Oh, no. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, CD. Where am I? CD dot SSH. Should be okay. Good. So I'm on my local SSH. Now we're going to create a new thing, and we will. Again, the command is there. This is just making a new key. I'm going to put a default email to associate with the key. Command is there, sh keygen, and then we're just going to create that. It's the same thing like creating a key locally. Do not write over your IDRSA key because you're probably using that. So we'll just make one. I'm going to make one called Next.js for now. Name this something that you remember for yourself because you need to identify the name later. But I do not want it to write over my other keys. So I'll click enter and that's it. So now we have the key. Now we're good. We just have a key we created. We need to get the private key. We need to get the public key. Okay, so let's grab the public key first. So this command is there. It's going to show it. Oh, no, wrong one. Actually, want to use the new one we created, right? Next.js. I just copied that over. So it's the Next.js one. That's the one we need. So I'm going to copy this one. So the public key we want to add to our server. So let's log back into our server. Let's just clear this. Let's SSH root. Yeah, that should be the server. Yep, 212. All right, so we're gonna go back into our server, and we're going to go into CD root where our SSH is, our SSH folder that we created. .ssh. Again, we're on our server, and here we want to open up nano authorized keys. We want to make sure we tell it, hey, this new key we created is authorized for the auto repo. So I'm gonna label this auto. For the auto deployment. Yeah. All right, so I'm just gonna paste it. All right, command control O, enter, command control X. So we close it. Now our authorized keys on the server saying, hey, there's this other key that is authorized, but we have to tell it to authorize the GitHub. How do we do that? We have to add the private key of the same key to the repo. So we're going to do that right now. So we will go back locally, close out of this connection, and we're going to close and clear. So we're back locally. And now what I want to do is I want to copy the private key that we need to show that. So we're going to go Next.js. Make sure it's not public, it's the private key. So yeah, it's really long, so you want to copy this over. I'm going to scroll up here, copy, private key, here it is. So we're going to copy that over. Now I want to flip over back to our GitHub. So in order to do this, we want to go into our repo, right? This is only for auto deployment. Go into the settings, and what we want to do is go into secrets and variables. We want to go to actions, and we want to create a new repository secret. This is the secret for the actions. Now I'm going to paste this same key exactly as is. We want to use, you can name this whatever you want, but keep in mind that this is, you're going to be using this name in the file that we're about to create. I usually just call it SSH private key. You can name it whatever you want, but just remember, you're going to use that in the YAML file. So we're going to add that secret. Good. So now we have a talking point between our repo and our server for auto deployment. This is not for, just you can git clone using the previous steps, but this is for the sake of now we need to tell the server we want to tell GitHub to push to, right? So this is giving GitHub to say, hey, once things happen, push to the server. So now let's go to the next step, which was now we got to create the YAML file in our repo. All right, so let me show you that. So for this step, I'm just going to share my full screen because I'm going to do this in VS Code. So now all I'm doing is that same local repo, whatever your app is locally. Mine was just a default Next.js. We want to open up, I'm just opening up VS Code because we want to create that YAML file. This file is basically going to create an action inside of GitHub, which is going to tell GitHub, okay, whenever there's a push to this server. This is the file that's going to do all of the heavy lifting. So we're going to just create a new folder called .github. And then it's going to be called workflows. A new folder called we're going to create a new folder called workflows. And now we're going to create a file here called deploy.yaml, YML. And now I have this again in a gist, and I'm literally just going to paste what I have. And now we're going to work through this. I want to go over all of this here. So hopefully you can see this. I was hoping this would be a little larger. But so now we're going to say, okay, this name is fine. We're only going to change a few things here. We're going to tell when the branch is called main, whenever it's main, that's what I want you to auto deploy the branch whenever you get a push. These are just names of steps. You can leave this alone, tell it to use 20, leave this alone. And here's where the SSH private key, we want to identify the name of the key called secret. So it's like a variable in GitHub saying, hey, pull that key. So remember, if you change the name, you want to use that here. Just swap that here. Now, here's where we want to do some of the edits. This area we don't need. This is in case you want to use multiple branches. I'm not going to worry about that for now, although it's in there if you want to do that for the future. We need to swap the host to server name, tell it the folder name, and the name of the app and which port. This stuff you can leave alone, except this one file. I want to show you how to make sure you edit that. So here we're going to pull the IP address, right? So now we want to tell it the YAML file. Make sure when you deploy, send it over to that other server. And remember, the keys are together, so that's where the connection will work. We want to update the directory. Remember, I named it Next.js. var www.next.js, and the app name, you want to make sure it matches the server block, which is Next.js. Remember, we created that. So that's why I would like everything to be in sync, because you don't want to be remembering what the names are. So just keep everything one name. So it was just called Next.js. And remember, it was port 3000, right? We kept it on 3000. If we have multiple websites and we have multiple Next.js apps, you can change the port here, right? For this one's gonna be 3000. Now, if you want this file to like do multiple branches, there can be a little more edits involved with this, but for now, we're just keeping it that's only gonna deploy the main branch. Now, this step can save you some headaches, which is you wanna make sure that you identify the Node.js file, especially with NVM. You wanna tell it, make sure that you are using this node version. In order to do that, you want to make sure you have this right path. Just go onto your server. I'll do that really quickly. All right, so I'm going to log back in to that server, and I'm going to type which PM2, and that tells me the path of the node version that I need. So it looks like it matches because I've done this pretty recently. v20.12.2, right? So I'll edit that for now, and you can leave the bin. So if you compare this here, it'll be 0.2. So that's important, right? So we want to get that exact path up until the word bin, Okay, so I'm going to close that out, or I'll just move this to the side. Now, this stuff, just so you know, this is actually it's telling it what to do based on the variables. Like when you auto deploy, these are commands that are running on the server. We're telling it, look, cd into the directory, git pull the origin. So it's literally just git pulling, doing the same commands, npm install, run build. So every time it command, that's why the build, that process can take some time when you auto deploy, because remember, same thing Vercel is doing. It's telling it to basically, because on every change, you want to reinstall packages, make sure they're added, and then npm run build, right? Because you edited things. And then it's just telling it, go ahead and restart the app. So PM2 has to restart it. You don't need to restart NGINX. That's always going to be running. You just need to restart the app again. And it's telling it if it's already there, just to restart. If it's the first time, do the full path, right? So that's why these ports is all saved. And then you have to save, PM2 save. Actually, we forgot that step previously, so we can actually go back in and do that. Make sure that you did do PM2 save initially, which I believe we forgot that step. Okay, so that's actually important. Although we would have done it here anyway. Okay. Okay, so we'll go back out. So let's actually see if this works. So let's make an edit, right? So I'm going to do npm run dev. All right, so as we can see here, we have the live site right here, Next.js and we just have the default. So let's make an edit. So I'm going to go to the local version, and let's make sure that the auto deploy actually works. Let's edit the app. Let's go to page. Let's edit. Where should we edit here? Get started by editing, whatever. I'm actually just going to write hello, right? It's just big. So you can see here the change, right? Now, obviously on my live domain, there's nothing there. I added hello, and we'll close out of that. And we're going to just go ahead and commit this. So we'll do git. I have an auto thing where, so you want to git add dot, and then you want to git commit with the message, but I have like a different message where I could just do git ACM and update text. All right, so there it is. And I'm going to git push. All right, so now that's important because I committed the workflow and I committed the change. So now if we go back to the browser, okay, so let's just go to the browser. Let's go to GitHub. Now, if we refresh, we should see our actions. Okay, cool. So we can see our commit, right? This is what I want to show you here. You can see our commit that we just did. And then it committed the workflow. And now this should auto run because the YML file is what's doing the action, right? It's telling you what to do. What's cool about this is it's going to tell us if we made an error. So if we click through it, it actually will show us what's happening every single step along the way. So where it's at right now, it's actually doing the deploy, right? That step on the server. So if this, oh, look, it's actually npm run building. It's actually giving you all of these things and it's saving. It looks like it's about done. Now, if you see the check mark, that actually is a great sign. That means nothing failed. If something does fail, it's just like Vercel. It's the same idea. You could have clicked through the update text and actually go to deploy, and it would tell you where it kind of messed up, right? And usually it's going to be at that situation. If everything worked as is, we should go here and refresh, right? We're on the live domain. Auto deployed, guys. It auto deployed with the change. Exactly what all these fancy, hosting platforms are doing. And now we can just make edits and just auto deploy to main. So now we're kind of all done. Now, anytime we work on our app locally, we don't really have to worry about the server that much. Unless there's an error, we don't really have to worry about much. It's going to be pretty seamless going forward. Now that we have our app, we just need to, go ahead and save it and make sure that, we push to our repo. And as long as that YML file is not edited, we're good to go. And that's it. Now, the one caveat is, it's only going to work on the main branch, right? So there's like a little further to the tutorial if you want it to have a staging branch and all these kind of things. You just need to edit the YML file, but that's beyond the scope of this tutorial. But that's also not that difficult to have it available in my gist as well. And that's pretty much it. And another cool thing is you can still keep your Vercel. You can keep the connection if you want to see all those deployment links, but you'll have your main site will actually be on the main branch. That's pretty much it, guys. I hope you love this tutorial. Again, I'm going to leave the gist in the description of the video. So tell me what you guys thought of this, and I'll see you guys in the next one.